Andor Episode 5 has arrived. After the sheer amount of setup and Easter eggs last week, hopes were high that we get some crazy payoff this week, but that wasn't exactly how things went. It seems that the show has been structured into distinct arcs, each taking place over 3 episodes. The first arc was Andor killing the guy on Morlana 1, fleeing to Ferrix and covering his tracks, then escaping with Luthen. And while episode 5 may be a bit more of a quote-unquote filler episode, there's still a fair bit to talk about, especially with what's to come next week. Episode 6 looks like it's going to be huge. Cassian and his fellow rebel fighters are going to attempt an undercover heist in an Imperial base. We'll get that insane visual of them escaping TIE fighters in that crystal meteor shower. Cyril is probably bound for the Imperial Academy, and we could see who exactly Mon Mothma wants to bring into the circle, whether it's Bail Organa, Saw Gerrera, or someone else entirely. But before we get to that next week, we have episode 5, The Axe Forgets. Although this may have been the slowest episode of the series thus far, the stellar character work continues. Everyone has clear motivations and is on a set path going into next week. So let's go ahead and break down what just went down. We open with a depressed Cyril Karn waking up in his apartment on Coruscant as the sun begins to rise. He heads to eat breakfast with his mother, and we can tell the two don't have the greatest relationship. This is probably where a lot of Cyril's trauma stems from in regards to pushing him towards the Empire. This week didn't feature a ton of Easter eggs, but one of which was actually Cyril's breakfast. That's right, we finally see the triumphant return of blue milk. Of course, it was first seen in the Lars homestead on Tatooine in A New Hope. I'm not a big cereal guy, but that stuff does look delicious. On the plate, there's also a Milaroon fruit from Star Wars Rebels. I'd love when Star Wars sneaks in little things like this. Cyril's mom is just running him down. The guy cannot catch a break. She's talking about how he disappointed her and how he has no prospects for the future. His mom says she is going to call in a family favor from an uncle who will take on Cyril. It seems destined for him to join the larger Imperial regime, more than likely the ISB, with his striking similarities to Dedra. Now over to Cassian under his cover-up alias Clem. He wakes up at the camp alongside the rest of the rebel heist crew. Clem notices that all of his stuff and weapons were moved while he was asleep. He frantically finds the Kyber crystal, which he's kept hidden from the rest of the group. The rest of his belongings are with Arvel Skeen. He says Vel asked him to look over everything. Arvel puts together that Clem must have left wherever he was in a hurry, which we know of course that he did. They talk about Arvel's tattoos, one of which is a crate head. We of course know of the Krayt Dragon on Tatooine, but what exactly is this barcode looking thing? A lot of fans are speculating that it could be a prison located on the sandy planet with 2 suns. Clem refers to the tattoo on his forearm as by the hand. This one we're a little less sure about, but the prison connection seems to be there. Clem goes on to recall when he spent 3 years at a youth prison on Sippo at age 13. We then get the line referenced in the title of this episode when Arvel says, quote, "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Now it's our turn to do the chopping." We learn that Arvel is there for revenge, which we learn more about later. Clem dodges the same question and shares his doubts about the planned heist. Back to Coruscant, this time with Mon Mothma, we find out she has a daughter named Leda, who really doesn't seem too fond of her, and accuses Mothma of being selfish. Back on Aldhani, Clem is chilling by a fire with Karis and drinking Dray milk, which is apparently disgusting, but you can live completely off of it. Sadly, it is not blue. That stuff must be of a lesser quality. Yes, in a Star Wars breakdown, we are spending this much time on milk. Karis shows Clem a piece of navigation technology that's pre-Empire. It can't be jammed or intercepted. He says once you've mastered it, you're free, and much less vulnerable at that. Karis goes on to talk about his view of the Empire, and rambles on about a manifesto he's writing. Clem dumps the milk, and heads over to Vel and Terriman to go over their escape. They ask Clem how much weight the ship can carry. He explains there's a load clutch on the ship, and insists he be the one to fly it, when he finds out the group didn't know about this crucial piece of information. Without removing the clutch, the ship was going nowhere, as it's attached to some rails. They reluctantly accept. Over at the Imperial base, our inside man Lieutenant Gorn heckles a pair of officers and tells them to clean up the small ruins we discussed last week. It looks like they served as target practice. Clem is told that when they infiltrate the base, his backstory will be an Imperial private and sentry who has been transferred from the Alkenzi airbase for special duty. He then pushes Clem's shoulder back, which he doesn't like, and asks if he knows how to walk like a soldier. Over to Ferrix now, we see the Imperial intervention in full effect. ISB Lieutenant Supervisor Blevin, who we met last week, is there along with a Captain Tigo. They're ordering a hotel be cleared to be used as their headquarters. Terriman has Clem and the others practicing marching like Imperials. They even have E-11 stormtrooper blasters. Vel and Cinta, who stand by and watch, will apparently have different roles on the operation. Clem suggests they adjust their positioning since Arvel is left-handed, and after an argument, they agree. Much like last week, we hear a familiar sound as Cinta points out a TIE fighter on the horizon. They quickly hide the weapons as to blend in as shepherds before the TIE circles back and races by, incredibly close to the ground. Karras remarks that surprise from above is never as shocking as surprise from below. Back at the base, Gorn is speaking with a Corporal Kimizzi, who asks if they're really tearing down a part of the forest to expand their airbase, which he informs them that they are. Cinta tends to Clem's injured arm as he catches Arvel going through his bag, which he doesn't like. Clem puts on an Imperial uniform, but we anticipate he'll look a little bit more done up come the operation. Now, he probably won't be a full-on stormtrooper, but an upcoming Black Series action figure gave us a preview of what his disguise might look like. Over at the ISB, Dedra, along with Hirt, continue to investigate thefts similar to that of Andor stealing their Starpath unit. They talk about familiar planets where incidents took place, including Kessel, which we saw in live action in Solo: A Star Wars Story. This incident could actually be from the first episode of Star Wars Rebels.
All troopers, focus your fire on the Jedi,
which is actually taking place right around this time. We also hear about Jakku from the sequel trilogy, as well as Fondor, an Imperial shipyard from Star Wars Battlefront 2. The pair deduce that the rebels are spreading out their thefts in an attempt to make their attacks appear to be random. On Aldhani, Clem and the others burn their map, give a toast to the rebellion, and head out towards the base. Vel has Clem recount all stages of the plan. Once again over to Coruscant, Cyril's mom says his uncle thought that police work didn't fit him. He asks what does. His mom says she recounted the events on Ferrix as best as she could, which Cyril admits to hearing, but that it will be up to his judgment. Clem wants to know why a high-ranking Imperial officer would help them. Vel explains Gorn fell in love with a local Donnie woman and lost his promotion. He also lost the woman, which caused him to lose his taste for the Empire. She adds that everyone has their own personal rebellion. At the Imperial base, we see the cargo ship the crew will attempt to steal for the first time. The thing is pretty sizable and will definitely carry a lot of Imperial payrolls. Gorn talks to two officers about an unpainted wall. They explain there's a reduced morale at the base. Aldhani seems to be a boring assignment for an Imperial, but an engineer from Coruscant is coming. Imperial engineer immediately has me jump to Galen Erso from Rogue One, but he's probably way too busy working on the Death Star, or farming.
But farming? Really? Man of your talents?
The Krennic memes will not stop, mark my words. The officers all want to be able to see the Eye, of course that celestial event that will provide the rebels with their escape route. The heist crew are all chilling on a hill when Arvel pulls a knife on Clem and discovers the Kyber crystal around his neck. The group finds out that Cassian is being paid for the mission. They're forced to get back on the same page as they observe an Imperial shuttle landing at the base. Cassian gives a good monologue about how it doesn't matter why he's there, that they should all be afraid, but there's a difference between fear and losing your nerve. Back on Coruscant, Mon Mothma and her husband are in a speeder, much like Obi-Wan and Anakin in Attack of the Clones. They're coming back from something important. It may have been the dinner mentioned in the last episode with two of Palpatine's closest confidants, Sly Moore and Ars Dangor. I feel like this could have been something else though. It's a massive missed opportunity if this was off screen and not shown next week. Perrin asks Mothma about a foundation she's donating money to, although this is clearly a cover-up for the early rebellion. Mothma definitely isn't going to be able to stay hidden for much longer. Cyril sits in his bedroom. It looks like he has some Stormtrooper or Clone Trooper action figures, because of course he does. Like I said in week 1, this guy is spaced Dwight Schrute. He looks again at the hologram, clearly not done with Andor yet. The heist team arrives at the Imperial base and Clem signals Gorn atop the wall. Arvel approaches Clem and tells him about his brother. The Empire took his tree farm and flooded it. He couldn't fight back and ended up taking his own life. Arvel always hated the Empire, but at this point, he doesn't even know what to call it. He and Clem/Andor seem to now be on the same page going into the mission. Vale and Cintra take off for their portion of the operation, leaving Terriman in charge. Finally, back to Coruscant where we catch up with Luthen to close the episode. He's in the back of his antique shop once again. We didn't pick up on any new Easter eggs in comparison to everything we got last week. In fact, we can actually debunk one. What we thought were to be Sith and Jedi holocrons are definitely not. That does make sense. The Empire wouldn't allow anyone to just have these sort of things laying around. Luthen is using an old radio of some sort, clearly trying to listen in on the Aldhani crew and how they're doing. Unfortunately, he's not picking anything up. For the first time, Luthen seems to lose his confidence a bit. He's worried Andor could track back to him and the Circle. His assistant says that by tomorrow, it'll be all over. He responds with, or will it just be starting? And that pretty much does it for episode 5. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it was definitely a much slower pace this week. We were expecting that heist, Mon Mothma's dinner, and maybe even Cyril going straight to the Empire, all of which seem to now be on the table for next week. That being said, we will be back with another breakdown for next week's episode. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch it when it goes live. Until then, Red Squadron, Red 5 standing by.